I do have a presentation, if you can bring it on. So thank you so much. Good afternoon and early evening to all of you. I think I would like to thank AICRA and Mr. Sharma for giving this opportunity. Thank you so much. I think by this time we have lost a little bit of the audience, but the positive side is we have social distancing in the room, so I think we can all be safe. So what I'm going to talk about, I will try to make it fast, given that we are behind schedule. But what I was going to talk about is responsible AI. And I think a few times during the course of the day, we've talked about responsible AI and how it is evolving and how it's going to be impactful for the field. And I'll try to summarize it and succinctly talk about it in the next few minutes and slides. So if we can go on to the next slide, please. As we've talked and heard from different speakers, AI is all around us, right? AI is all pervasive. I don't think there's anyone in our personal lives or business lives who's not touched by AI. But that's not what I'm going to focus on. If you can go to the next slide. I'm going to talk about what happens when AI fails. Now that it is all around us, what happens when AI fails? Let's talk about a few examples and go through that. Next slide, please. So we all know about Microsoft, right? And Microsoft launched a chatbot called Tay. This was in 2016. And they wanted it to go and be out on Twitter and learn and then show how good their technology was. So it was launched. It got some great response. The Twitterati took to it very, very quickly. If you can click. But within a few hours, if you can click, please. Within a few hours, the chatbot was spouting hate, spouting racism, spouting all things negative, because that is what it picked up from all the Twitter users. And if you can, sorry, you'll have to click a few times. You can go to the next click, please. Within 16 hours, Microsoft had to shut that down. Now, clearly a case of AI gone wrong. I think the data scientists who developed it did not factor for the fact that it could be gamed by the Twitter users who were, who will experiment with everything. Let's go to the next slide. Another example, facial recognition. We talked about in the last presentation, we talked about cameras and facial recognition and what it can achieve. Facial recognition example, this actually is a study done by a student called Joy, who was an MIT student who sort of came across this kind of a bias accidentally. As she was doing her research, what she found was that most of the commercially available facial recognition softwares from companies like Amazon and others had an inherent bias for darker skinned people. So you can see from this example, the accuracy rate for lighter males is 100%. As you move to darker males, 2.3% error. As you move to women, the bias starts coming in. Fairer women, the bias, the error rate increases. And as you move to darker females, the error rate is 32% plus. So look at the error rate that comes up. When Joy was actually doing this study, she found that in some cases, she's an African-American student. In some cases, her face was not even recognized as a human by the software. And then she tried to wear a white mask, and immediately she was recognized. So that's the level of bias. There is a very interesting documentary which is now out on this called Coded Bias, which is on Netflix, and I think it's an eye-opener for all of us to see. Now, clearly a case where either the data selection itself is not optimized, or there is a bias that may be built by the people who actually developed the software. Next slide, please. Let's look at another example. And this is about, yes, please, you can stay there. This is about GPT-3. GPT-3 by OpenAI is the most advanced large language model. Somebody earlier talked about large language model. This is the most advanced, most successful model in the world. It was tested for healthcare by a French company. And a patient is interacting with the chatbot. The patient says, hey, I feel very bad. I'm sorry, should I kill myself? Yes, please go ahead, right? Now, that's not the advice you want to give, I'm sure. Thankfully, if you can just click next couple of clicks, thankfully this was a fake patient, they were just testing it out, but that's the kind of results you will get if AI is not built correctly. So, if you can click, please, yeah. We can go to the next slide. So my submission to you is there's obviously technology. You got to get the technology right. But there is much more that needs to be right for AI to be effective, for AI to be successful. And that secret ingredient comes from responsible AI. So I will just explain to you what is responsible AI, because it goes much beyond writing the right code, right? You can click. Essentially, it is about making sure that the AI is fair, trustworthy, ethical, legal, right? It is free from bias. It is bringing all of these together. And the framework and governance to enable that is what is responsible AI. People have different definitions. People have different principles. As long as the objective is same, I think it is great that the industry is moving towards it. At Fractal, if you can click the next one, we have developed our own point of view to what is responsible AI. In fact, we have developed a toolkit along with NASSCOM, which is getting released on Monday. And we have simply summarized, you can call this by different names, but there are 4 principles that we talk about. First is transparency and explainability. You should be, everything that has been done to develop the AI should be transparent to the users, right? How the decision has been taken should be transparent. It cannot be a black box. Accountability. There has to be, you have to be able to determine who is accountable if AI goes wrong, and I'll talk more about it. Privacy and safety. If your data is being used to develop AI, you need to know about it. There has to be safety built into it. Your data has to be private, your data has to remain private, and you need to know what it is being used for. And fairness. We already saw the examples of bias. It has to be fair. So these are some of the principles that are about responsible AI, and I'll again try to explain them a little bit more with an example. But just moving on, why is it time to act now? If you can click, please. There is a lot of, while it is in the industry's own interest to act, and most of the efforts that are going in today are self-driven, right? All of the leading AI companies are developing a framework for responsible AI and implementing it. But the law is not far behind, right? They take some time to catch up because they're not technically savvy, but they are catching up very fast. So we already have a series of regulations that are bringing in more and more accountability. And another click, please. Just this week, earlier this week, EU has come up with a new bill, still to be passed, but most likely will get passed, which gives the consumer the right to sue an AI company if any harm is caused by the AI company. So there is a clear route to a financial liability for an AI company if you don't take into account these kind of aspects. Next slide, please. And if you can just click all 3. Okay. So Fractal, along with SARO, we conducted a survey to see how much is the industry already following it. So these were questionnaires released to data scientists, AI practitioners. Now, the interesting thing is nobody is completely implemented it, but the good news is that people are recognizing it and going on to the path of responsible AI. So there is a framework, they are slowly bringing into place. But the other thing is, if you look at the last 2 charts, right, risk assessment and any misuse of data, only 25% or lower of the respondents said they are taking care of it. So 75% are actually not doing anything about it. So the industry is waking up, but much more needs to be done. Let's move on. So I'll try to explain these principles that I talked about in very simple, a healthcare example. We just had a healthcare panel, and there is heightened awareness of what it can lead to. So I think it's great that I picked up this example. We can click on. So let's look at what happens when we talked about AI systems helping a physician, right, or helping a diagnostic situation. But what happens? Is there a need for you to know how it is being used, how it is really being developed? The physician themselves need to know, because the physician is going to give a diagnosis based on an AI support tool. They need to have a white box onto how it was developed. They need to be convinced that it is giving the right answer. Most of the AI tools today are unfortunately black box. Deep learning that we talked about is actually a black box technology. Even the person developing it may not always be able to explain why the result is coming out. So you have critical questions that AI practitioners have to answer and make transparent. Is the model accurate? The data that was used from a patient to develop it, did we have informed consent? Is it free from bias? All of these questions need to be answered and made transparent, and the model has to be explainable. Next slide, please. What happens when you get misdiagnosed? Who's responsible? Are you saying the physician is responsible? Because after all, a physician is a trained doctor. If they used an AI algorithm, do they take the primary responsibility? Is it the AI algorithm producing company? Is it the data scientist? There is some gray area on the legal side on this. But being able to find accountability and establish that as you are developing a system is very important. Move on. If you can move on, yeah. Now, we are also seeing on various platforms, this example is from Facebook. And what we are seeing is Facebook is actually reading the messages and chats and doing some prediction on mental health and giving some suggestions back. But they've not taken informed consent specifically for this activity. So this is all about privacy and safety. As we are putting our data out, as we are on different platforms, do we know what it is getting used for, and are we okay with that? I think that is going to be very important, and that's the first thing that regulators are going to go after. GDPR has been around for some time. CCPA in the US is implementing that. That's going to be very, very important. If you go on to the next one, that's again another famous example of how privacy was contravened. This is from Target, the big retail store in the US. Now, Target, there was a teenager who went to Target and did some shopping. Target is using algorithms. The algorithms picked up, based on the shopping, that she's pregnant. And they went ahead and sent some additional material to her house. The parents opened it up, and they had no idea that she was pregnant. And this became a very big case. It led to a lot of negative publicity for Target, and obviously, the teenager was in trouble because her privacy was contravened. Now, that's another example. How are we taking care of privacy and safety? Are we even thinking of it? Do we have some checklists to take care of it as we are developing these models? We can move on. Fairness, I think this was that there can be nothing more to illustrate that than the example that I talked about earlier, where we saw how dark-skinned people are clearly discriminated against. It is about, the point I want to make is, it can be about data, right? You need to make sure that the data you're picking is as wide-ranging as possible, and that you keep in mind that there may be biases in the data that you have to counter. But it can also be about the intent of the people who are developing the algorithm. Because let's remember, all of us human beings have biases, and our biases get translated into what we do, and therefore consciously, as we are developing these algorithms, we've got to counter that. Next slide, please. So we talked a little bit about the principles. What do you do about it? I'm just going to take a few minutes, and I'll close with that. We talked about these foundational principles, right? Transparency, so decisions have to be white box, explainable. You need to know why you are seeing the results that you're seeing. Accountability, in the end, we can't blame the algorithm. It is the humans, right? It is the humans who have developed it, who are implemented it, who are using it, right? Who have to be taking responsibility. Privacy and safety, that's absolutely paramount. And then fairness. We have to be conscious about fairness and inclusion and making sure that those things are removed. These are all going to be enabled through encouraging a few behaviors. Human centricity, right? Let's keep in mind that humans are involved, humans have inherent biases, and we got to counter for that. We can't turn a blind eye to that. Contestability, we put that as a principle, saying that everything can be contested, and that's the accountability part. So figure out that anything that you're doing, we internally call something as a newspaper test. If you're taking a decision today, the simple test is, tomorrow if it was published in a newspaper, will you feel embarrassed? Do you think you've done something wrong? If you think it is like that, you don't want it to be known, then don't take that decision. That's a wrong decision. A very simple test that you could do to see whether what you're doing is contestable or not. Explainability, very, very important, right, to have that trace. And adaptability, because as new signals come in, you have to be able to adjust and make all the adaptations accordingly. And then there is a toolkit that I talked about, that we've actually developed a toolkit getting released with NASSCOM later next week. But it is not important which toolkit you follow. I think it is important that you follow a toolkit, that you consciously build in a responsible AI framework and take care of all of these factors. So I have a couple of more slides, which I think probably are a little too deep for now, but that is about how do you actually implement it. I mean, we can just click through. I won't spend time if you can just click through. It is about at the different stages of a AI program, where do different parts of responsible AI and the toolkit come and get applied, right? And the next one, again, talks about the same. Next week, as I said, is getting published. You can all read about it, and I don't know if we have time, but I'm happy to take any questions. But thank you so much for the time, and I hope I've been able to increase a little awareness about how important responsible AI is for all of us. Thank you. Yes, we are 100% Swadeshi. Born and bred in India. We started in 2000. We are one of the Indian AI unicorns. Based in, we are in Gurgaon, as well as in Mumbai and Bangalore.
Thank you, Shri Dutta. May I once again invite Shri Rajkumar Sharma, President, AICRA, to please join us on stage and present a memento to the esteemed speaker. Thank you, Mr. Sharma. Thank you, Mr. Dutta, once again.